Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron,
And I'm Brett.
and you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins.
Welcome to episode 8, Alloyed, where we finally get the official reveal. The stranger is Gandalf, we think. Halbrand is Sauron, we're pretty sure. Isildur is still missing, darn. And looking forward to what's coming in season 2. Silson, we made it.
We made it. And yeah, like you said, I think a lot of stuff people knew was coming, but it was still good to see the how it actually came about.
Let me ask you, before the opening credits even roll, we get the reveal from the mystics that they're here to serve Lord Sauron, and they found him, the stranger, the meteor man. He is Lord Sauron. Did you buy it?
No. I think that to start the season finale with that was so much of what was so clear of a misdirection that it kind of was obviously not him.
I'll be honest, I bought it for about 2 seconds, and then I realized, wait a minute, we've still got a whole episode. There's no way.
Yeah, because what else was it going to be about?
Right. I thought it could have been an effective cliffhanger if they had dropped it at the end of the previous episode and let us sit with it for a week.
100%. And I have thought that I think I might have said that in our last episode, that episode 7 was just a filler on every front. And in my opinion, they were already doing so much in this episode 8. They could have put that whole stranger thing with his interaction with the mystics. That could have been the end of episode 7. Even if you wanted to cut it short and say, where they say Lord Sauron when they finally meet him, and then you start off episode 8 with the follow-up to that and him saying, no, I'm good, or even sprinkled in somewhere. I don't care where you put it, but that would have been a great ending for episode 7, the mystics meeting the stranger and calling him Lord Sauron.
Yeah. All that being said, I love episode 8, and I think it is impressive that they fit 2 big reveals into a single episode.
Well, it's not just those two. It's not just those 2 big reveals, but also we get the creation of the Rings of Power.
The Rings of Power finally
Exactly.
Get some screen time. Yeah.
Yep. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. Let's dive right in. Let's get our good, bad, and great. You want to start us off?
Sweet. Yeah, my good. I thought they did a really good job with, I call it Halbrand coming out, but him basically finally being straight up with Galadriel about who he is. I thought that interaction between the 2 of them was very well done. I did have some issues with it. That's why it's just a good and not the great. But we'll get to those later. What was yours?
Interesting. I loved the interaction with Halbrand and Celebrimbor in the Forge. And Halbrand we finally get this picture of the sweet-talking Sauron that we knew was there and was probably happening behind the scenes. But he is just propping up that smile on Celebrimbor's face with both hands and making him feel like he's king of the world. He's giving him all the credit that poor Brimby has been searching for all his life.
Amen
And
to that. And you kind of see him try to be a sweet talker a little bit in Numenor with the queen, right? When he tells Galadriel, hey, shut up, go stand in the corner while I try and smooth this out. When he's on his own and not conscious or conscientious rather of what Galadriel might be thinking or perceiving by his sweet talking, it goes to a next level, right?
yeah, I mean, I'll always remember this scene because when we were watching this for the first time, the night that it came out, you were about 30 minutes ahead of me. And I remember you calling and saying, where are you at? Okay, I'm staying on the line because you got to see what's coming. and we stayed on for like the full 7 minutes of it, and I've got you on speakerphone. And right when he says the call it a gift line, you could have heard me all the way out in San Diego gasp into the phone because it's the old Leonardo DiCaprio meme, like, oh, there it is, he said it, that's it,
Yep.
that's the. And I
Yep.
guess maybe we should explain that's a reference to Sauron's character Anatar. He shows up in disguise to the elves in the Silmarillion as this fair being Anatar, which means Lord of Gifts.
Yeah, and Brett's getting way ahead of us in the script here, but that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was part of the script.
Yeah.
Oh, it is in the script. Delete all that, Matt.
Yeah.
Delete it all.
Where were we though? Oh, so let's hear what your bad was then, Brett.
Okay, so the mystics. I don't know why we needed 3 mystics. The lead mystic with like the shaven head and the creepy eyes, I thought that one was pretty good. That's a pretty creepy character. But the other 2 just seem like incredibly socially awkward. I don't really understand their purpose. And they for me were a distraction during the whole showdown with the stranger. I think it would have been fine just to have one.
Yeah, and I don't care so much about the number, but my bad is also the witches or the mystics and just the acting, honestly. I feel like the rest of the series had put forward a pretty good foot on the quality of the acting that's going on. And then you get these mystics that they are building up your suspense by just showing glimpses of them in previous episodes, and you're wondering, who are they? What are they doing? What are they up to? And all of a sudden in one episode, they go from, absolutely nothing about them to they're dead. And the acting that went with it, just not... It was subpar for the rest of the show, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yep.
My great, though, was the very closing scene where Sauron finally enters his kingdom, enters Mordor.
As the true king of the Southlands.
Yeah, true king of the Southlands. Mount Doom is just blooming in the background. I thought that was a better scene of Mordor and Mount Doom than the previous episodes where it, showed Southlands. JK Mordor.
Well, yeah, so good.
That was a great scene. I liked the billowing cloak that he had, waving in the wind behind him. It was all black and huge, and his face. It kind of reminded me of, for all the Star Wars fans out there, Star Wars Episode 3 when Anakin gets that evil in him and his eyes turn yellow and all that kind of stuff. Speaking it's like of the real Sauron has come out.
Yeah. What did you make of the transition from the rings are made, they're sitting on the table, and then the rings are in Sauron's eye and it kind of transitions to him? It stood out to me, and that's what gave me goosebumps, is that even though he's off in Mordor, he still knows that out there in Eregion are these rings of power that he had an influence in.
Yeah, and it made me wonder when Galadriel comes back from her interaction with Halbrand. It made me wonder, like, because she talks about how they need to make these rings without outside influence, right? That it needs to be just for the elves. And I guess my question, or what I was wondering at the time, is like, in the forging of these rings, is it just like whoever's present that dictates who, gets to wield the power? Or because I always thought it was just whoever wears the ring, right? Anyway, what do you think?
Going off of the Tolkien source material, the idea is that Sauron had a physical hand in forging the 9 rings for men and 7 rings for the dwarves. But when it came to the elves, it was only his influence on the method of forging them that existed. But even that influence was enough that once he created the one ring to rule them all, it had power over the 3 elven rings. Because the elven rings were made independent of him, independent of his craft or whatever, they were all able to sense the moment that he puts on the one ring that it's out there and that it is a ruling ring. And from that point on, they all take their rings off so that he can't see what's going on with them, I guess. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the series adaptation goes with.
Right. What was your great, though?
My great is the stranger reveal. We kind of get the reveal during the fight with the mystics that, he's an Istar, he's a wizard. But then at the end, the confirmation that this is Gandalf with the quote, when in doubt, always follow your nose. That was another one where he said it and I screamed, and Katie was in the other room and she's like, what? I'm like, he said it. He said the thing.
Yep.
What are you talking about? I got goosebumps.
Let's just dive right into that then. So, Stranger finally gets unveiled, kind of, right? No one has actually said the name Gandalf yet.
Correct.
But it's pretty clear that seems the direction that they're going. So what did you think about that whole interaction, or that whole, development of the stranger finally getting some kind of identity?
Ironically, it comes from the mystics, right? He wields the staff from Nori. She says something great. You choose what you're going to be. You can be good. You're here to help. And he picks up the mystic staff, which I think we'll get into a little bit. And pretty soon the mystics, they say, he's not Sauron. He's the Istar. He's the other. And then the last thing they say is he is, and nothing. And the thing for me that I caught on to this time is, well, there are other Istari in the universe. There's Saruman, Radagast, the 2 blue wizards. It was interesting to me that these mystics know that there is the Istar and the other, meaning, if it's not Sauron, it's got to be someone specific. And so I'm wondering if when they say I wonder if they may have said Olorin, which is Gandalf's Maiar name. I don't know what they could have said. To me, that almost seals the deal that this is Gandalf. And I'd be really upset if we get a switcheroo in season 2.
Yeah, I agree. I will be upset if it's a switcheroo. My question when rewatching this was, they find out he's not Sauron, he's the other, he's the Istar, and then they say and then he says, I'm good, and kills them. I wonder what they were going to finish that sentence with.
Right.
So it'll be interesting if they come back to that or not. Also, speaking of killing them, what did you think about the butterfly imagery? Did that have significance? And I'm wondering, are they actually dead, or were they just sent, like teleported back to Rhun? Because they had kind of like a necromancer like effect going on, right? With
It kind of looked like the
the
ring wraiths.
Nazgul. Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's like, were they dead? Were they banished? Because they didn't come from Rhun the moment the meteor came. Because it would have been, I assume, quite a bit of time before they
Right.
were able to make it over.
Which is what the season shows, right? Is it's quite a bit of time period they show up at the meteor site, which is interesting. How are they? I mean, they're these cult followers of Sauron, and they obviously are associating the meteor and the constellation that Gandalf is looking for with Sauron. So why do Gandalf and Sauron have so many similarities that they are identical except for
Exactly.
name?
And it makes you wonder, like, is this just Amazon's, springboard into unknown territory that Tolkien didn't really write about? What does Gandalf have to do with Rhun? Because that's not really part of the canon, right? So I think that they're just taking a lot of liberty in, let's tell Gandalf's backstory, since Tolkien never did. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
Yeah. The one bit of canon, and maybe it comes from one of his letters that I'm reminded of, is he mentions that the blue wizards were sent to Rhun,
Right.
and as a result of their work there, it was actually failed, and cult followings ended up forming instead. So maybe we get some backstory. Maybe these people are an unfortunate result of what the Blue Wizards had been doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is true. Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, but it does make you wonder, like, is he trying to blend? Well, you can't really blend that storyline with the Gandalf storyline because it seems like the cult is already created and thriving.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So there's some story that we're yet to find out.
Right. So,
but butterflies,
Gandalf. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just say the butterflies, though, like obvious connection to Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf talks to butterfly moth things to
Amen.
go get the eagles. So what's the significance of turning these wraiths into a bunch of moth butterflies?
Right. And again, it kind of makes me wonder, because also something very interesting, at least, I don't know if it'll be significant, but interesting is when he banishes them, kills them, whatever it is, their staff also disappears.
Yeah.
Which you don't really see that in any of the other magical things that happen in the Lord of the Rings, right? Like the ring wraith sword stays behind, Sauron's ring stays behind, stuff like that,
Are we getting set up for a showdown between Sauron and Gandalf? Because we never actually get a face-to-face in Lord of the Rings, even though Gandalf at one point does say that, Sauron was my enemy. Like, I was sent to help defeat Sauron in Lord of the Rings. Are we going to get that?
Yeah, at some point you would think so, right? Because Gandalf is, next to Galadriel, the chief, opponent.
He's a demigod, right?
The chief opponent of Sauron. You think about in the Hobbit movies when Gandalf is basically begging people to listen to him, just like Galadriel is in this series, right? In this season 1. The threat is real, people. Take it seriously. It makes you wonder. We obviously know Galadriel's connection to that passion, but I wonder where Sauron's connection to that passion actually comes from. Is it just a zeal for justice and peace, or did he and Sauron have a run-in that he's still chapped about?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sitting here getting excited that maybe season 2 we get a confrontation between those two. That'd be fun.
If not season 2, I would think at some point during this show, right?
Yeah,
At some point
there's
during,
got to be a coming together.
yeah.
Is there any world where the stranger is not Gandalf?
Like I said, at this point, if they do, I think they're just going to have a lot of unhappy fans because they have invoked some of the, I would say, semi-sacred symbolism that goes along with Gandalf.
Chief of which being follow your nose.
Exactly. Follow your nose. When in doubt, follow your nose. And also the song about the wandering, not all who wander are lost. I think at this point it would be detrimental for them to not make it be Gandalf. And I think a lot of people would really enjoy a little bit of a backstory on Gandalf more than what they have gotten, from other sources.
Yep. Okay. We're on the same page there. One quick thing, Nori's going to go with him, our beloved Harfoot, main character. I noticed that when Poppy runs up to her, again, in slow motion, what the freak is up with the slow motion? Like, they said goodbye 30 seconds ago. We've got to do a slow motion. Anyways, she says, promise you'll come back. And Nori's like, change the subject. Promise you'll look after the others. And Poppy's like, yeah, of course, of course. Nori does not promise that she'll come back. Does that mean that Nori is going to get the axe? Literally. And is that good news for you?
From the show, I can only hope. But it will be at least a small victory if the rest of the Harfoots are axed, and we only have to deal with one.
And you're talking about axe like cut from the show. I'm talking about like killed, mauled.
Dead. I do think that Nori will die in Rhun at some point, and I think that she still has some work to do, though. I think that she's going to be somewhat of a martyr, and it is going to be she is going to be the, what would you call it? The defining piece of Gandalf's love for the halflings and his theory that the halflings are the key to destroying the ring.
I agree 100%. I think that's exactly where we're going. I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the Harfoot, so it would make me sad to see Nori die and all the others, unlike you.
I'm sure that they will make it very sad for you. And I'm not human, for crying out loud. I'm going to be sad when she dies, but am I going to, in future episodes be like, I really miss Nori? Nope, I will not.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got one reveal down. The next one, the one that we've been saying this whole time, the whole show is about who is Sauron, where is he, what's he doing, and we finally get it.
Yep, finally get it. And like we've said, there's been plenty of indication leading up to this. If you know what you're looking for, right? The Smith connection with Owlay and the apprenticeship and all that kind of stuff. But this episode, and I think you mentioned it already, the part where he says, call it dramatic pause for effect. Dramatic pause. Gift. And then, obviously everyone who knows the name Anatar knows exactly what happened just there.
If you don't know the name Anatar, well, then sorry, sucks for you.
Everyone else is wondering, why did he pause for so long right there?
I had to think, really, has he never given a gift to anyone before? Like, is he coming up with the word gift?
Yep, and to go along with that, you can tell, I think the actor who plays Celebrimbor did a great job at conveying this, but as Celebrimbor is, saying things as if by inspiration, but they're actually coming from what could be memory, is also totally an indication that someone's been whispering in his ear.
So you think that's him genuinely thinking that it is his own words, that we're going to wield something with power, not of the flesh, but over flesh.
Yeah, and just like with Galadriel, and maybe we'll skip ahead and bring this to the front, but when him and Galadriel are having their little showdown of, it's me, I'm Sauron.
I'm the problem.
Yeah, she is coming at him with, you wanted, or you saved me on the raft. You wanted to be the king of the Southlands and bring your people to the light and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, no, you saved me on the raft. You wanted me to be the king of the Southlands. I wanted to stay in Numenor. And yet, at each turn, he was able to play so well into her blindsided desires that she totally just was eating it hand over fist, and totally just thought this complete alternate reality was the reality. And I think same with Celebrimbor here, right? You can see that he has totally played into his talking him up. Celebrimbor has such a need, and a desperate need even, for a legacy, right?
And you called that out early on, that he hungers for that.
Yeah, that he has been just feeding that, right? To where I think that it can override and overwrite any small detail that does not coincide with supporting the theory and supporting the legacy. So yeah, is it possible that Celebrimbor got the ideas from Halbrand, but was able to, from Sauron's silver tongue, but also Celebrimbor's desperation for legacy, was he able to rewrite his memory a little bit, the small details of the source, so that it could play into the narrative he was trying to have of a great legacy, And
we've talked about, hopefully in future seasons, we maybe get some flashbacks of the Halbrand character doing this exact same thing with Pharazôn, maybe potentially even with other races like the dwarves and the men. I think he's very good at what he does. I love the Halbrand actor, Charlie Vickers. He's very convincing. We talked about this too. Poor Galadriel. She just can't get out of her own way. She approaches him with the scroll, and she thinks that she is Sherlock Holmes. She's solved the case. Tell me who you really are.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, girl. You finally caught on.
And I think you bring up the destruction or the melting down of the dagger as being symbolic. And I think in a way it is for sure, in that, at least to a certain extent, I think she's learned her lesson of, I was way too caught up in, my own narrative. I was way too blindsided by my own, designs and desires, that I had no idea what was right in front of my face this entire time.
What would you define her mission as, that just blinded her so much? Because her mission was to hunt down Sauron and kill him. And then she's been with him for at least several weeks now.
Well, I think that still is her mission, right? I think though that there was just a recognition that the revenge that was playing into it from her brother was allowing her to be blinded to making stupid decisions and not seeing the full reality, right? So I think that that's where the symbolism of the dagger being melted down is, I'm not going to forget about my brother, but he is no longer going to be the chief motivator, which has caused such reckless decision making on my part in this quest to kill Sauron.
Yeah. You mentioned she's been blinded, and from the very first episode, we've pointed out and we've tied back to it multiple times in other episodes. That quote that evil does not sleep, it waits, and in our complacency, it blinds us. And that dagger is the symbol of her being blinded. Yeah, I've got to think she's sitting with herself, wondering, obviously she's led Sauron right into a Region and exposed him to Celebrimbor and Elrond. She's also got to be thinking, man, I led him right into Numenor, this great ally, and I led him all the way into the Southlands. And
made him king.
Made him king of the Southlands. And she's got to be thinking, man, what are the consequences to all of Middle-earth?
And I almost killed his chief adversary in the Southlands.
Yeah. And we get a nice little Easter egg line from Halbrand. He says, "Thank you. You've done more for me than you know."
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
And I'm going to make sure people see it. And
yeah, I won't forget it. I won't forget it, and I'll make sure no one else does either.
Oof. And in their little showdown, he says, "What are people going to think when they learn that Sauron lives because of you?" Oof.
Yeah, so speaking of, do you think there's this big question, obviously, of why doesn't Galadriel come clean to at least Elrond, if not Elrond, Celebrimbor, and Gil-galad? Do you think that it's purely shame and embarrassment that exactly what Sauron just said? What are people going to think?
I haven't thought of another reason yet, which kind of contradicts this idea of she's letting go of her pride. But I think both can be true. I think she can recognize that she needs to make changes, but also coming fresh out of this incredibly shameful realization.
Like you said, it's hard to come up with another reason. Like I said, at least to not tell Elrond. I wonder if maybe her concern was because I can see him trying to talk them out of being at least so hasty in making the Rings of Power. Like, hold on, if a ton of this idea came from Sauron, why are we still moving forward with it?
Right. Oh, and that's the thing. Oh, okay, here we go. So in the manipulated vision that she has of her brother, Sauron takes over her brother and basically says, you don't need to lie to them. Just let the work continue, which is exactly what she does. She lets the work go forward with making these rings. I thought that was really interesting that even though she's able to recognize that it's Sauron infiltrating her, most sacred memory, did what he say still influence her decision to let him go ahead and keep making the rings?
Well, and maybe it was Sauron's design to, not have his hand in the making of the elven rings in an effort to make them feel like they were not vulnerable to him. But maybe it was his design that there would only be one. And like she said, one corrupts. And maybe that was his whole plan from the get-go, is he knew that the elves would just tear themselves down with just one.
She does mention that she kind of plays this game with Elrond, makes him promise that he won't distrust her idea again. And she reminds him, hey, you promised that you wouldn't make the mistake of not trusting me. So that makes me think, well, okay, maybe she does have a plan for not disclosing all she knows. I just don't know what that would be.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that the most likely scenario I can come up with, besides she's just embarrassed, is she doesn't want Elrond to talk her out of it, and she doesn't want to deal with Celebrimbor, basically. Probably doesn't think that he's worthy of being in the inner circle, honestly.
You could kind of see a dark side of Celebrimbor by the end. Is he already just super corrupted, just already?
Possibly. The other thing is, why does she... Like, I don't think the 3 was a bad idea, but why is she so quick to be like, did you make them? All right, we'll make 3. Up 2, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we laying this all out? And again, the best I can come up with is she sees an objective. She knows the elves need power. This is the most immediate way to get power. And frankly, she knows that in her quest to destroy Sauron in the past, Gil-galad and Elrond have both been huge obstacles. So that might be, another reason that is holding her back.
Yeah. It might be worth noting that in that room we have 3 future ring bearers. Gil-galad and Galadriel are original ring bearers. Círdan, the shipwright elf, is another ring bearer who eventually gives his ring to Gandalf, and Gil-galad eventually gives his ring to Elrond. So we have a bunch of ring bearers in the room. You had some really interesting points about Gil-galad as a leader that I think we need to talk about.
Yeah, just from that interaction, not just from that interaction in this episode where they're talking about, we want to make a crown, we want to give it to you, it'll be all powerful, you'll lead us to victory. And he is basically like, that's a bad path that we're walking down right now. Let's shut the whole thing down, much to, no other elf in Middle-earth wanted this outcome more than me, but the smartest, wisest decision is to call it quits, pack up, and go home. And I just think it brought to my mind in all the other instances we've seen Gil-galad this season, and he drives a straight line, a hard line, and he's fair. I think he is unbiased. Doesn't let his own personal interests or emotions govern his decisions. He's not perfect, but I just thought pretty respectable guy.
Yeah, my respect for him grew tremendously in this episode, because early on it felt like, man, he's just kind of a sneaky sidewinder trying to ship Galadriel off, get her out of the picture, which may not have been such a bad thing, all things considered.
Yeah,
but,
he does come off that way, and adding to that perception is his management of the truth. He does not tell everyone the whole truth all the time, which I think is acceptable to a certain extent for someone in his position, right?
Speaking of Gil-galad and Celebrimbor, their fates are interesting, to say the least. Maybe a spoiler here if you don't want to hear what eventually happens to Celebrimbor and Gil-galad, so maybe mute for a couple minutes. But we do know that Celebrimbor's ultimate fate is Sauron comes back to Eregion trying to find the location of the 3 rings. Celebrimbor won't tell him, so Sauron locks him up, tortures him. Eventually, Celebrimbor dies from his torture, is shot several times with arrows, and then his body is hung up on a pole like a banner and carried into war in the final battle as like a war banner. So that'll be interesting to see, and kind of rough. And Gil-galad fights in the last alliance along Elendil, and Isildur writes a letter basically saying that Sauron grabbed Gil-galad by the head and neck and with his bare hands burned him into oblivion. So
Rough.
hopefully neither of these two are your all-time favorite characters.
But hey, that's okay if they are. It's okay if they are.
It is, because those are, I mean, talk about noble ways of dying.
Yeah.
That's as bad as it gets.
What did you think about Sauron revealing himself at all? Like, I think that there was enough of Galadriel that wanted it, like, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. That wanted to believe that he was not, given a good enough explanation. And Sauron being, the silver tongue he is, I think he could have come up with something that at least would have pacified her for a time. Why do you think he chose now's the time?
I think he couldn't resist torturing Galadriel just to the utmost and just leaving her in a crumpled heap of like shame and self-loathing. I think he, based on him infiltrating her, most cherished memory. First off, how does he know about that memory? How does he know what Finrod tells her and whispers into her ear? That just speaks to the power that he's been able to regain. And in that dream takeover, he's telling, why would you say that that Sauron killed your brother? He's just full on manipulating. Like, he's not trying to win her over to his side. I think he kind of says that later on, like, yeah, come be my queen. Sure. I don't think he actually believes that she's going to do it, but I think he does torture her.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think he has seen the writing on the wall of, once they get to Eregion, I think that he sees that his effect on pulling the wool over Galadriel's eyes is diminishing. And he knows that she is a person who, at her core, is going to go for truth and justice.
Yeah.
And so I think he kind of gives up on the whole escapade of, trying to use her or win her over to his side. I do think, though, that the temptation and the offer for her to be a queen was legit.
It sticks with her.
It does. It does. Into the Lord of the Rings.
For thousands of years, to the point where she's offered his ring, and she quotes to Frodo what he said, what he promised to her.
Yep. Make you a queen more powerful or stronger than the foundations of the earth. Yeah. Would things have been different had she accepted the offer?
What do you mean?
Do you think that she would have tamed the beast? Do you think that there would have been a Lord of the Rings story, or would King Sauron and Queen Galadriel been the ultimate heroes of Middle-earth?
I don't believe so. I mean, that's how much of that is just our tradition of good versus evil coming through. But I think of Gandalf's quote to Sauron when Sauron tells him, we could join him, Gandalf. We could join with Sauron. And Gandalf says, there's only one Lord of the Rings, and he does not share power. And I think that would be the case. I think he would dump her like a wet rug, and we would be left without a Galadriel, who I do think is critical to his ultimate downfall.
100%. And I think that is so true in a very general sense. Whenever someone is motivated by power or lust of any kind, people are way down on their list of valuable things.
This is great summation.
And yeah, at the end of the day, if you're motivated by love, you end up doing all the right things and for the right reasons. But I also found it interesting. Did you notice that when they were forging the Rings of Power, that when they dropped the mithril in the ore, it somewhat resembled the Eye of Sauron?
I did not notice it. I am so glad you pointed it out. As I watched it again, that was not a coincidence at all. Clearly, they could have made the shape of the mithril any shape, but they made it the shape of a slit of eye of Sauron shape.
Yeah.
Hinting to his influence is still part of these rings, right?
I mean, it could be. It could very well be a coincidence. But in any case, coincidence or not, I thought it was very well fitting.
Yeah. Yep. That was good. I wonder
But
if we'll see more of
also,
that.
yeah. But also, when you see what they end up doing, you're like, well, good thing we enlisted a legion of dwarfs and elves to build this monstrous tower of a forge
Just needed an oven.
and a bowl.
A bowl. uh,
It makes you wonder what their plan was. Were they going to build like this statue of refined mithril that everyone can just come, bask in its light, or what was the plan?
I think
don't
so.
know.
That's what Celebrimbor says. Is we don't have enough. We've got to be able to. We need a power enough to birth a son. And
yeah, basically, huh?
Like, we're going to deal with something a bit smaller in scale. And yeah, it's going to be round, and there's going to be power in it. Wonder if anyone hasn't caught on yet. He's talking about rings of power.
I did like how when they finally displayed the rings of power on the table, it was a complete lookalike to the scene from the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes.
I thought that was a nice touch.
Yes. I have been pleased. I think we mentioned it with the Balrog last episode. And I think we saw it even with Sauron walking into Mordor. Things look like the Peter Jackson universe.
Yes.
And that's good.
Yep.
That's great.
Anything else you want to talk about with old Sauron?
Nope. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him in season 2. We'll talk more about him as trailers come out for that. It should be fantastic.
So kind of just like the last topic we wanted to talk about was some of the things that we saw happen in Numenor. They were kind of like little PS notes for this episode, I feel like.
I forgot that they were even in this episode.
Yeah.
But they're kind of significant, right?
Well, it definitely makes you ask questions. So, yeah, why don't you hit us off with what it was?
So we've got Arian, this heretofore unknown child of Elendil. She's the official painter, drawer, pencil sketcher of the kingdom. And
apprentice.
That's the word.
What is she an apprentice for, though? Apprentice.
Pencil sketching.
No, it's stonemasonry or stone something.
Yeah, some.
Anyway.
So she's got her time with the king, drawn his face for the contest and the blue ribbon prize. And he wakes up and starts chewing her out, telling her he knows what she does in the middle of the night when nobody's watching. Kind of creepy. She's like, no, you're mistaken. I'm not Muriel. And he's like, oh, it's almost like he knows who he's talking to, but he calls her Muriel anyways.
Well, he I don't know if she denies that she's Muriel. She says that she tries to say I'm not, and he says the queen. I know, not yet, but you will be, right?
Yeah, you get the sense that reality is blurred for him too,
right? And he says that he's like, I've looked into this, Palantir so much that I can't decipher between the past, the present, or the future.
Whatever it is, it's super urgent for him to let her into the Palantir room and look into it, and we don't see what she sees. My prediction is, man, did we just set up Elendil's other kid to be the one who leads Numenor into destruction? If so, that's rough for Elendil. That's a rough bloodline.
Right, and it kind of makes you... So he uses Muriel's name, right? So makes you think, okay, well, he's meaning to talk to Muriel, but he's also not blind. And so he sees that that's obviously not his daughter, Muriel, right? But he's obviously very confused, and you're left wondering, like, was this a prophecy for Aarion? Was it, like, was he truly completely blinded by who he was talking to and thought it was Muriel? Like, was he in some kind of a vision stupor? It makes more sense if he thought he was talking to Muriel, because we know that she eventually becomes queen, right? There's no indication that that Aarion would become queen, but who knows? Maybe. And
This was something that it felt a little out of place in this episode, unless it has really big significance coming up.
it's got to, because, like I said, it's a complete PS note in there. It shows nothing of what happens when she looks, when, after she looks, what happens. The ending scene of it is him saying, "Don't look too long. You'll have a hard time separating what is from what was and what will be," right? And that's it. That's all we get.
Yeah.
And she goes up and uncovers the ball, and that's the end of the scene. So it is, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest question marks from the episode. And you kind of wonder, like, did they think, oh, we should add this because I just had a great idea, so add this little teaser, and then, while I'm writing season 2 scripts.
Yeah. This was another thing I thought would have fit much better in episode 7, but it leaves us with the question of what's going to happen. What's going to happen in season 2, and so maybe we can end with that, Silson. If you had to give us, what's the one or two things that you are most looking forward to seeing play out in season 2? What would you say?
One of them is definitely how Sauron regains control of the orc army. And the other one, well, it depends on if they just skirt around the issue like they kind of did this season with Gandalf, I won't be that interested. But if they delve into, some quality content of his experiences in the land of Rhun, that would be interesting. Yeah. I'll add a third one. Really interested to see how, I think that next season is going to be centered a lot on Numenor. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if they bring about the destruction of Numenor next season, how all of that happens, and how, the beginnings of Gondor emerge.
If nothing else, it's going to look cool, at least based off that vision of the flood that we saw. My big thing is, I was just reading an article today of a quote given several months ago by the actress who plays Disa, where she says that season 2 is about to get really dark, really heavy. And I'm all in on seeing Disa corrupted and plotting her way to the top of the food chain in Khazad-dûm.
I'm going to say, sounds like she's going to be on some murdering rampage down in the caves there.
I'm all for it. And if we get
all for the murdering rampage,
that's right. I think Disa's a fun character, and I think if we see her go ballistic, it could get real exciting. All the better if the Sauron, maybe as Halbrand, maybe as some other identity, makes his way into Dwarven land and starts getting in Disa's ear. Could you imagine that combo?
Mm-hmm. Totally. I like it.
Well, we look forward to, I don't know, what are we looking forward to, Silson?
Well, let's first share the lesson learned or the theme from this episode, right? The quote that we like. So the quote that we liked was from Queen Muriel: "The way of the faithful is committing to pay the price, even if the cost is unknown, and believing that in the end it will be worth it."
Poor financial planning advice, but on a symbolic
Great advice
level.
for the faithful, though. Great advice for the faithful.
Yes. I can get on board.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for episode 8 and season 1. So we will probably release a little teaser for season 2 when the time gets closer, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks for joining us on the Rings. What the fetch is our name? Thanks for joining us on the Last Alliance.
A Rings of Power podcast. Say it again.
Thanks for joining us on the Rings of...
My gosh.
Thanks for joining us on the Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
Hallelujah.
Holy frick. Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.